Hey there, guys. This is George. Thanks for joining. And this is Weekend Travelers here on EPG. Make sure you guys like and subscribe. That's right, like and subscribe for more awesome videos on this channel. And welcome back, guys. Again, my name is George, and this is Weekend Travels. It is the anniversary to the Battle of Gettysburg, July 1st, 2nd, and 3rd. And we're going into our Weekend Travels vault to pull out this video of a tour of the beautiful historic Soldiers National Cemetery, dedicated by Abraham Lincoln in 1863 November. That cemetery has all of the dead Union soldiers who died fighting here in Gettysburg, July 1st, 2nd, and 3rd, 1863. Your tour guide will be none other than Charlie Fennell, a licensed battlefield guide who is also a teacher out at Gettysburg Hack. And you'll also have an introduction by the late, great Terry Hovel, who used to be a teacher at Gettysburg Hack. So sit back and enjoy your lovely tour of Soldiers National Cemetery.
And some of you have Dr. Fennell, of course, as a teacher. Some of you have had him in the past. Dr. Fennell is the premier, this is the opinion of most people, he is the premier battlefield guide here in Gettysburg. Not only because he knows his history, but the way he presents it is incredible. You'll be entertained today, you'll be rewarded for coming out on this beautiful fall day, and you will be educated today about something that basically relates back to exactly 150 years ago this month. I will tell you, this is a licensed battlefield guide. This is Dr. Fennell's job to do tours. He every year provides us with 2 or 3 opportunities for him to give the History Club a tour for free, and so I just want to let him know that we all do really appreciate it. And with that, I'll turn it over to Dr. Fennell. I think we actually have more than 30 now.
Well, good. Well, thanks for coming, everybody. I know it's the bloodiest battle in American history, bloodiest battle in the Americas. Roughly 16,000 dead in 4 days here. 16,000 dead in 4 days, and we found one of the missing still in 1996. So we're still uncovering that kind of evidence why people come from all over the world to see Gettysburg. Yesterday I had a group of people, and they were from 2 foreign countries. They were from England and California. Okay? And they came here to see the battlefield. Okay, so it's that famous. The other most important thing that people remember about Gettysburg is Lincoln's speech. Okay, so that occurred here in the cemetery. The most famous speech, and speaking became popular. Why? Because it was only 2 minutes long. What's the matter with these people? You know, I would be more popular as an instructor at Hack if my classes were only 2 minutes long. You see, but no, I got to talk for 2 hours, like the other guy. But basically, you're in the middle of the battlefield. I know it's kind of hard to envision that today, but you're sitting in the center of it. The key ground of Gettysburg is this hill you're on right now. Okay, on July 1st, of course, as we know, Confederate soldiers came here and met Union soldiers, and they fought to the north and west of town. When the battle was over, the battle lines were south and east because the Southerners won the first day. That's why there's a second day. Okay, they won the second day. That's why there's a third day. They lost the third day. That's why there was no fourth day. Okay, so that's basically how the battle raged, and the key was getting the Union forces off the hill, which they never did, as we'll show you. There are over 3,000 Union dead on this hill today that were killed or died as a result of the Battle of Gettysburg. As we go around, you also notice that there are other graves here as well, from the Battle of Gettysburg to the Vietnam experience. So we have well over 8,000 veterans and their spouses buried on the hill today. Certainly it's not as famous as Arlington because everybody goes to D.C. I don't know why they do, but they do. That's where that group I just jumped off of is going today. They're from New York, but they're going to D.C., but they stopped here first. Okay, there. And so they go down there. So Arlington's a bigger cemetery, has more famous people in it, but this is the first national cemetery established in the country. Set the precedent for all the other ones, of course, that were established. Okay? Now, if you come over here, let's just go over here. Come on over here a minute. I want to show you something. two most important. You're just inside the gate of the National Cemetery. Like I said, this was part of the battlefield, 1863. You can see where you are. And this is the way the cemetery is laid out. Okay, the dead were buried where they fell originally. They're buried out in people's yards out here, hastily dug graves, 3 to 6 inches deep maybe. And it rained on the 3rd of July and rained almost every day until the 14th. What's that do to loose dirt? Washed it away, and the dogs and pigs found them there and ripped them out of the ground in pieces. And they didn't care if you were southern or northern, they don't care. A leg is a leg, an arm is an arm, you know. And that's what our governor saw when he came here, and he said, and I quote, "That's one hell of a way to treat heroes." And so he got the state to purchase 17 acres on a hill array. This was his third chance. They were going to combine it with Evergreen. No, that was going to work. So then they wanted to get a mutual association together. That didn't work. So he said, we'll just start our own cemetery on this hill, and that worked. Okay, so you have 2 cemeteries on the hill. The one that was here before the war, okay, and the one that's here after the battle. Okay, so 2 cemeteries on the hill. And this is the way it's laid out. It's laid out like the end of a hockey stick. Okay, because that's what they purchased. $2,475.87 is what this acreage cost. But that's 1863. Don't try and buy it today for that. Okay, and you can see we put an annex on because Americans don't stop fighting in 1863. We're just getting started. Okay, we got the Spanish-American War, I think. Is that a war? Okay, all right. We have World War I, we have World War II, we got Korea, we got Vietnam, and so we had to put an annex in. Their 6-acre annex. That was not part of the original cemetery. So that's what I wanted to show you. And of course, it says over here, where's that little thing at? Oh, where was Lincoln? Okay, where was Lincoln? Or better yet, where was the speech delivered? And so that's what we're going to take a look at next. So if you have any questions about how this was laid out. Okay, all right, let's go over here and we'll show you this. Don't trip over this thing here. You know, okay, it was built in 1879. Lincoln only speaks here in the evenings. Okay, like around 1 a.m. You want to hear Lincoln speak? Come back here. He comes and speaks here at 1 a.m. Okay, it wasn't built when Lincoln was alive. So he didn't deliver the address here. The first president to speak from the rostrum was Rutherford B. Hayes, a legend in his own mind. Oh, those Ohio boys, you know. Look what happened to the country once they got in. No, I'm just kidding. But anyway, so you have he was up there. Calvin Coolidge gave the shortest speech here. You know, we like Silent Cal. We also had Eisenhower spoke from here. Roosevelt spoke from here. Harding spoke from here. So a number of presidents. And it's usually on Remembrance Day. And I can't remember what day it is, but it's the 19th of November. 19th of November. And this November, they will speak from here again. They will speak from here again. Whoever the keynote speaker is will speak. And maybe if the president comes, he too will speak. Okay, and he'll give a shorter version, 1.5-minute speech. Hi, happy to be here. Gotta go. Okay, that'll be Obama's address. Because we told if he does come, he's not going to stay long. Not going to stay long. Okay, and so this is not where Lincoln spoke. This is not where Lincoln spoke. Okay, let's go over here. Come on over here. Gentlemen, you're looking at a rather unique monument put here in 1912. 1912, just a little before my time. It was the brainchild of Daniel Sickles. Daniel Sickles was one of the Union generals at Gettysburg who was grievously wounded here, hit with a cannonball below the right leg that shattered his shin. Oh, don't you hate when that happens, you know? And when Sickles left Gettysburg, he took his leg with him and gave it to Lincoln as a memento of the battle. What's Lincoln going to do with it? He's 6'4". Okay, he didn't know what to do with it, so he gave it to the Army and intended to say the guy that came over and got the leg, well, what are we supposed to do with it? Well, I don't know, but you can't throw it out at Sickles' leg. Okay, and that leg then was put on display at the Army Hospital Museum, which was down at Walter Reed until they closed Walter Reed, and then the leg had to hop over to Silver Spring, where it's on display to this day. So that's Sickles' leg. Sickles is the man responsible for introducing the bill into Congress that establishes this as a national military park, February of 1895. He introduced the bill on February 12th. What day is that? Lincoln's birthday, you see. Of course, it didn't pass through, you know how Congress is. They were pretty fast then, it only took them 2 days to pass the bill, but it was introduced on Lincoln's birthday. So this is a 1912 speech, and that's part of Lincoln, okay? The part that gave the speech. But he didn't give it here. but they wanted a monument to a speech. It's the only monument I know of to a speech on the face of the earth, because that's how important the speech is. Very valuable. We're going to talk about that when we show you approximately where we believe he actually delivered the speech in 1863. Okay, now let's walk over here a minute. Okay, over there through the evergreen trees there's a hill. You can see it. That's Culp's Hill. That's the right flank of the Union Army. To the right of that, you can see a little, I used to think that was a monument when I started here. You see a little white thing in the woods over there? How many have that? You need my glasses? Alright, that's Wolf Hill. There's monuments on Wolf Hill too. Where the monuments are on the northern side. Okay, so that's part of the Union line. This is the center of it. And then it goes off and you see hills down there above that little white farmhouse there, and that's Big and Little Round Top. Giant letter J, fish off here where thumb and finger meet. Key ground. Not Little Round Top, key ground right here. Southerners win by taking this hill. Okay, they don't win by taking Little Round Top. They take Little Round Top and don't go past it. It's like the dog chasing a car. What's he do when he catches it? You ever see a dog drive a car? No. Okay, you see, so that's a key. That's why they wanted to put the Union dead on this hill, not anywhere else, but on this hill. If you look down here, these are more recent wars, 20th century arguments. Right here, second, World War II, Korea, that sort of thing. So you can see we're centrally located here on Cemetery Hill. Where guns are, guns were, just for your information. Do be careful. I do not believe they're loaded today, but you never know. Okay, the reason I mention that is because some of these, this tube here, would you check in the end there, is it plugged? Yeah, see, it was refurbished, and they put little corks in the end so they don't go off on people. Okay, and that's because birds or bees will get in there, and if you look in there and there's a bird in there, it's coming out, and now you're a casualty. You got a little peck mark right here. Okay, yeah.
And they took our cannons and never returned them.
I know they did,
house.
yeah. I know where they are. They're in that storage, but you have to go get them. Yeah, but they've been refurbishing them. The problem is the carriages. Carriages are non-historic. Okay, they're authentic fake reproductions. They're made at Gettysburg in the 1890s, and they're starting to break down. They're made of metal, should be made of wood. But this became a veritable gun platform during the battle. Okay, and that's because you have all these trees on it then. And I don't think McDonald's was here, but I have to check my notes. Okay, all right, so let's walk over this way. Come on, you got to check anyway, because I had a fake gun go off on you. Okay, see, there's no birthmarks. No birthmarks on a gun. They have 69 fake barrels that they mounted here on various carriages. Supposedly, though no one has ever given me a straight answer when I've asked, they have 419 cannon barrels in the park. Yeah, that's what I thought too. Yeah, they do. Yeah, but anyway, that's supposedly what they have in inventory, and of those 69 are fake. And they're all iron. All the fake guns are iron. That's because some are recycled. You know, iron could be used later in other wars or for railroads or whatever else you want to do. We had one cannon that was made into a monument. Okay, made into a monument. I'll tell you about that later. Okay, come on over here. Still Pennsylvania. They don't make them any better than they do in Phoenixville. Right there it is, 1862. When was the Battle of Gettysburg? When was it? That's right, could have been here, could have been there. Chances are it is. Most of the Phoenixville guns went to the Union Army in the Eastern Theater where you are. Okay, so this could be a Civil War veteran right here. Okay, this tree over here, come on over and check this guy out.
A witness tree. One of the few the park hasn't taken down.
Right. Supposedly there's one in the cemetery, right?
Right.
Yeah, and look, I was telling you, it blew a limb right off during the battle. This is a honey locust. Yeah, I know my trees. Okay, this is a honey locust, and it was here during the battle. So this is certifiable witness tree, but what did it see? Well, we don't know because it won't tell us. Okay, there are a lot more witness trees around here than people think. But this is one. Most of these other trees were put in here when they landscaped the cemetery. So they're old, okay, but they're not old enough. We're talking 1870s. 1870s. I know to you that seems old, but you got to be 1863, July, to be a witness tree. Okay? All right, let's walk over this way. Okay, as you're coming over here, this is where the Gettysburg is located. Right here. Two styles of, if you will, we got the flat stone and we got the little cubes. Okay? And the little cubes have numbers. And the flat stone have names. Okay, and the little cubes, the only thing we're sure of is they're dead. We're pretty sure they're Union or they wouldn't be here. Only Northern soldiers were allowed to be located in this cemetery. Southerners were eventually taken to Hollywood, and that's California. That's in Richmond, Virginia. There's over 2,900 unknown Confederates from the battlefield buried there. So that is there. 30,000 soldiers in Hollywood Cemetery in Richmond, Virginia. And one of the few they know is a guy by the name of Pickett. Okay. All right. These guys are identified, and we often talk about states' rights in America, you know, and we Southerners for it. If you take my history classes, you'll find out Northerners can play states' rights too when it suits them. You see, okay? And the greatest expression of states' rights, in my opinion, in America today is where you're standing. Okay? Notice how they're up, and they're divided up by states. Okay? That's what these sections are, and that's because Massachusetts didn't want those Rhode Islanders buried with their boys. Because we know how those people from Rhode Island are. They don't take care of anything. Okay? But those Massachusetts, oh, we'll take care of our dad, you know. We just don't want, and it's all right. I mean, it's a little stretch here to bury a good Presbyterian next to a Catholic. I mean, we'll have to suffer that, you see. And this is one of the first cemeteries where that was done. Integration, if you will, okay, in terms of religion. What's that? Well, yeah, that's right. That's right. Okay. And speaking of that, here we have a man by the name of Henry Gooden. And then this is the U.S. Regulars section. The regulars, the U.S. Army. Most of these people volunteer. So they're in state sections like Pennsylvania, Massachusetts, Rhode Island. But the U.S. Regulars fought here too. And so that's what that tells you, U.S. Regulars. Here it says Company C. See, they're organized by regiment and then by company. Regiments have a number, companies have a letter. So if you look at the communication quickly and it says a number, you know they're talking about a regiment. If it says a letter, you know they're talking about a company. And it matters because they're different sizes. You see, okay, different sizes. And it says 127th USCT. For U.S. United States Colored Troops. This is an African American. Gooden. He was in one of the emergency units that was organized in Pennsylvania when the Confederates are coming in. The governor organized them, and there were at least 2 African American units that were organized. One fought at York. In fact, they were under fire there, and we had at least one was known to be killed. An African American fighting at York. Remember, the Confederates went over to York. Okay, and they burn the bridge every year now. For the last at least 7 years, they reenact the burning of the Wrightsville Bridge. And they can do that because they left the pylons in the river, Susquehanna River. They're made out of stone. They're still there. They just put smudge pots on and light them electronically, and the bridge burns and people cheer, and they remember that. Okay, you see, so that's a great thing. That's another reenactment I have to get to sometime. But anyway, so Gooden then will enlist in the 127th U.S. Colored Troops. Remember, after Gettysburg, of course, one of the things you find is a drain on manpower. Okay, people are getting shot a lot, and it's hard to find people to replace them. And so Lincoln aggressively looks to the African American community, not just former slaves, but free African Americans in northern states, you see. And although the impression is given in the movie Glory that the 54th Massachusetts was almost all primarily, at least the ones you notice, were former slaves, most of them were free African Americans from northern states. In fact, they recruited in this area for the 54th Massachusetts. Okay, so this is Gooden, and he served. He lived in Carlisle. He dies in Carlisle after the war's over. He requested to be buried at Gettysburg National Cemetery, so they put him right here. He is not a Gettysburg battalion, but he's in the Gettysburg section right here. Okay, another thing while I'm here, I just noticed this. Look at this. Look at this thing. Oh my God. What the heck is this? Is this a new maple tree growing? Is that what this is? All right, guys, get a picture of that, George. That's grave desecration.
Canadian.
Canadian? What in the world are they doing here? Oh, that's right, shooting at Americans. No wonder they're here. Okay, a Canadian. There's another one over there. We might find others. I hope I'm right. Okay, because there's a professor at Hamilton University in Toronto that brings his class here every year, and he has documented, I think it's 29 Canadians buried here that were killed in the Battle of Gettysburg fighting for the Americans. Okay, and how do you explain that? Well, it could be that they were Americans that went to Canada, you know, and then decided to come back and fight for their former country. It could be that $13 a month looks pretty good to a Canadian who's not making that much. And it could be just, you know, they wanted excitement too and came here. So there are Canadians. Most of them are in, you know, New England. They've got some from Michigan. There's some Canadians fighting in Michigan units here. Okay, we also have some in New York, the ones that border Canada. You find a smattering of Canadians. Here, I noticed another one here. Just for your information, I didn't point that out yet, but I will now. These are footstones. They're footstones. They're not headstones. The body is there, not here. Okay, the body is there. Why? Because they bury them in a wooden casket. What happens to a wooden casket? Does it rot? Yes. And you can walk there and wind up in the grave with it. Okay? Your foot in his chest. Oh, now you know why my hair is this color. Okay? And they knew people would want to come and look, and so they put the bodies out there so you could look. In old cemeteries, see, we got vaults now. They put you in a vault so the ground doesn't recess. But in the old cemetery, sometimes you can still go, right, Dr. Stanton? You can go and you can see the depression where the grave is. I mean, noticeable. And that's because the casket is collapsed and the ground just fell in. Well, a lot of times what they do is go over and fill it in. I mean, that's what the cemetery keeper's supposed to be doing, besides mowing the grass and making sure that the ghosts don't get out of the yard. You know, that's what they do, and so they fill that in. And that's what they did here. As these things started to collapse and they filled them in.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, go right ahead.
How many of you are from here at these different schools locally, by show of hands? So you all remember being in school and marching in a Memorial Day parade and bringing your flowers to put on the graves? Right. Because back in the 50s, every kid in every school within the entire county, I mean, it would look like roaches. We would completely fill this place. And you got your flowers from your mother, your grandmother's gardens and that type of thing. I was quite in shock the last time I was at the Memorial Day parade and saw the few people that were marching. It was teachers and Girl Scouts and Boy Scouts for essentially.
Yeah.
We've gotten out of that Memorial Day.
Yeah, they still do it in Grafton, West Virginia. They march the whole parade. They got a national cemetery there as well, and that became a tradition. The first time it was done was at Petersburg, and this was after the war. I think it was could have been as early as 1865. A teacher took her class out and had them put flowers on the graves of the men that were killed in the Battle of Petersburg on June 9th, 1864. Okay, and they put those flowers there to remember them. They couldn't put Confederate flags there because that was taboo at the time, but they put the flowers there. Okay, and one of the graves was an 88-year-old guy. 88, that's the oldest soldier I know of killed in a battle in the Civil War. 88 years old. Okay, and the youngest guy in there was 15. It was called the Battle of Old Men and Young Boys. And a northerner was visiting one of her southern friends. And she happened to have a husband by the name of Black Jack Logan, who was a senator, congressman from Illinois, general in the Civil War. And she wrote to him and told him how nice this was. What a Grenoble sentiment. And Logan then, as he became involved in the GARs after the war, the Grand Army of the Republic, you know, we have a Vets, VFW, we have American Legion. Well, after the Civil War, they had the Grand Army of the Republic, you see. And so they mandated that all chapters would do this for Civil War graves in their area. And they would do it on the end of May. Why? Because we'll do it ahead of the Confederates. It'll look like our holiday. Okay, so we preempted them on that too. But that's what this was all about, here with the flowers on there. Okay, flowers on there. 22 bodies. 22 bodies, not here, back there. Not here, back there. You know, I work with all kinds of people, and even fifth graders. They're not real people. They're just one step on the evolutionary ladder ahead of cats. And they resemble them in many ways. And I had this group of fifth graders from Maryland and I brought them over here, you know, and I took them to Cobb's Hill. I thought I ran them sufficiently up the hill and the tower and all that. You know I was huffing and puffing. But these kids, when I bring them over here, they're going to run all around over here. Get over here! You know, okay, so I come over here, you know, I need a taser or something, cattle prod. But anyway, I'm standing there, I'm telling about all the Maryland fellas out here, and this one kid wanders off, you know, 5th grade, just wanders off. He's walking through that, you know, and he's looking around. I said, well, he's not causing any disturbance, so I'll leave him go, right? He goes out there all of a sudden. I'm talking there, I don't know, the dramatic moment in the talk, you know, and he goes, Mister! I'm looking around. I said, kid, I said, what do you want? He says, you're missing one. I said, what? He says, you only got 21. I said, what? So I went back and you count them yourself. There's 21. There's not 22. There's someone out here wandering around who should be in here. See, the 5th graders, smartest people in the world, thank God they don't know it. See, so this is wrong. This is wrong. 21, baby. Yes.
Basil Biggs and then probably put the body in with somebody else just to play with the people.
He could have done that. That's
when
right.
They were burying them.
Yeah. But look back here. Look back here. Now this is for your notebook. M.F. Knott. M.F. Knott is not a Yankee. M.F. Knott's a Confederate. He's buried in here by accident. He was wounded on Culp's Hill, left behind when the Confederates withdrew from Gettysburg. They left over 6,000 of their wounded behind, okay? And he was put in the hospital sites with the Union wounded. And he was put with the Maryland guy. And that's a Giant store. If you go to Giant store to buy that craft beer, think of that. That was Camp Letterman. That was Camp Letterman. Okay, at one time it was the biggest community in Adams County. Okay, there were 23,000 wounded left behind in the town of Gettysburg, had a population 2,400. 2,400. Okay, and he died there, and they knew he was from Maryland, so they buried him here by accident. So there's one known Confederate in the all-Yankee cemetery. Right here he is. If you come out here in the summer, when we have our summer help, you know, these aspiring young historians in the Park Service, they have to document this. They have to put a little Confederate flag so they can find it. Okay, and who found that? It was one of the guides here. We have a guide who wants to document every soldier in the Gettysburg section. Okay, and he's still in the process of doing that. And he came to look for this guy in the Union unit, didn't find him. So after he got a little frustrated, he went to the Confederate unit. Sure enough, there he is. So this is a known Confederate in the all-Yankee cemetery. Don't tell anyone. Okay. That's right, that's right. Now let's go over here now. Let's go over here. We're in the Minnesota section. This photograph was taken in 1867. And it's of the monument standing behind me. And of course the view is looking in this direction. Okay? You can see the view today is different than it was in 1867. This is the urn, the Minnesota urn. It was put here in 1867. It's the first monument on the field at Gettysburg. On the field of Gettysburg. Okay, and what they're doing is they're putting in more permanent markers here to remember who's buried there. Alright? And there's 52 bodies here, and they did count that, and it is right. Okay? Now if you look here, look, you got names, and here you don't. What's that all about? Well, that's a good answer. But the answer is even more simple than that. Okay? This is a military cemetery. The military has a very orderly mind. If we're wearing ties, everybody's wearing ties. Everything's got to be even. They could not handle this row not being the same length as that row. So they put in spacers here, and so these are dedicated to symmetry in the cemetery. And don't say that fast, Emma. Don't say it fast. Symmetry in the cemetery, and I came up with that idea, and I'm very proud of myself. Okay, you see, I'm easily entertained. But you'll see these spacers in through here, and that's what they're for. That's what they're for. Okay? Now let's walk over this way. Tell by the numbers. Okay, another thing, just so you don't get confused, we go around. The ones on the end there, the little squares, unknown. Okay, but we do have unknown in the state sections. And if we don't know who they are, how do we know they're from Wisconsin? What?
Their uniform? Or
Yeah, they had a
something?
cheese hat on. No, it's a uniform, you're right. And what about the uniform? It's the buttons. Because these were organized by the states. So when they left, they had state buttons, state seals on them. Okay? And they're made out of brass, so they don't rust. They're good collectibles today, you know. Okay? And so if you don't replace them, and they started to replace them with, generic buttons that didn't have anything on, or what was his name? Goodyear? Goodyear started making rubber buttons to replace them with. So that's how he got to start. He didn't make tires. Nobody had a car. You see? He started making little rubber buttons. Yeah. Look at that. Okay. And so we know from the buttons, or maybe where they were buried, that these guys are from Wisconsin, but we don't know their name, and so we made them unknown and put them here. If you add up the unknowns, okay, there's over 900 unknowns on the corners, and then the unknowns in here, you got 1,669 unknowns, which is less than half of the people in here. So that's pretty good for the Civil War, because they didn't have the doggy tags yet. Okay, they didn't have dog tags. I'll talk about that in a minute. So that's what these unknowns are doing in here. We're pretty sure they're Wisconsin people. All right, right here. Okay, another Canadian. Let's for your information, the first row are not Gettysburg. We're not killed at Gettysburg. That's where they start. These are locals that wanted to be buried here, so they put them in another row. And look at this guy, William Tinsley. He's in the 5th cav. And look, Annie, his wife. Okay, it's like George Jetson. George Jetson, his boy Elroy. Jade, his wife. Oh, it's good stuff. Good stuff. And so at least he remembered her name. And so this is a double. This is a double occupancy. Okay? And just for your information, they do that a lot in national cemeteries. Do that a lot. Alright? Who gets in first? Who's on the bottom? Who's on the top? How's it work? Does anyone know?
Depends on what they liked in real life.
No. Good answer. I'd expect that from you, Jessica. Okay. Depends on what they liked in real life. Well, that gives me visions. But anyway, it's always done the same way. Let's say Annie died first, which is unlikely. Okay. She'd be on the bottom, right? Okay, then William dies. What do they do?
Put them on top.
No. They pull her out, put him in, put her on top. Yeah, the women are always on the top. Always on the top. You see a double opener, no matter who dies first, woman on top and last, right, ladies? On top and last.
Oh, yeah.
Right there you
That's
are.
my
You're rolling.
favorite.
You're
That's
rolling.
where I would
My
be.
uncle used to always tell me, he's a World War II vet, he said, I'll be supporting your hand long after I'm gone. And I thought he meant his pension. Right? I thought he meant his pension. He fought in the 1st Marine Division, World War II, in the Pacific Theater. And then I found out that he was going to be on the bottom and she was going to be on the top. She had to explain that to me. So that's what he really meant. I'll still be holding her up after I'm long gone. She'll be on top of the head lap. So this is how it works in all national cemeteries, including Arlington. I did have occasion to see that one time. I was down during the cemetery, and they were burying a veteran, and they were lifting the woman out, his wife, and put him in, and then put her in on top. So I have seen that done. That's the way they do it. Okay. So this is he in trouble. Look at this.
Yeah.
Look at this. That's his name, and it just put and wife. Doesn't she have a name? Okay? Oh my gosh. And he thinks it's heaven. And she's been chewing on him ever since they've been dead. Right here. Right here. Her name is Mary. It's Mary Ann Rittinger. But Frederick didn't have that put on the stone. Oh my gosh. You see. But anyway, so there are actually 2 women buried in the Gettysburg section of the cemetery. Okay. It's not the first one. Not the first one. That's the first one over there. The urn. This was dedicated in 1869, but it wasn't quite completed. I'll explain that in a minute. If you look at the monument, it's a Soldiers' National Monument. You can see the eagle, symbol of the Union. Behind the eagle are 35 stars for the 35 states at the time of the Battle of Gettysburg. Don't try and count them. Okay? Around the top are 18 stars for the 18 states that were here in the battle. And I can never count them because I always forget where I started. I'm going to bring a paintball gun and hit one of them, and then I'll know. Okay? I will. Don't tell anyone. You're not allowed to fire anything in the cemetery, including paintball. Okay? But I'm getting frustrated. But anyway, right there it is, and then that's the genius of liberty on the top. Always want to know what a genius looks like, and now I do. Okay, if you look below her, the guy on the left he's war. He's war. See, he's got the accoutrements of war, and the woman on the right is Cleo, the muse of history. See, the muse of history. And you people in my history class, look what she's doing. Look what she's doing. Professor Havel, see what she's doing? And I know you harp on this all the time. You got to take notes. You got to take notes. Look at her. She's writing it down. He's talking.
Texting.
She's texting? Oh my God. Throw her out. Throw her out. Okay. You see, so that's what she's doing. She's writing it down. History begins with the written word. Okay. When you can write it down. And so that's what this site is. These two people weren't here when they dedicated the monument. They fell off the ship coming from Italy and are at the bottom of the Mediterranean. So they had to go back and get two more made, and they don't come until 1872. So that's about when the monument was finished. So these two figures weren't on it when it was dedicated here in 1869. Okay, so let's go to the other side. Kentucky didn't have any regiments in the Battle of Gettysburg. Okay, and what side are they on anyway? Well, they're really fighting on both sides. For example, Lincoln's favorite brother-in-law, a man by the name of Helms, who, not Jesse though, different Helms, who he wanted as a law partner, okay? And remember, Mary Todd's father got married again. So you have Todd's and you have Helms on that side of the Lincoln tree, so to speak, okay? And when the war started, he offered Helms a brigadier general star if he would declare for the Union. Well, he doesn't. He goes south, as all the Todds and the Helmses did, except for Mary, okay, who was married to the President of the United States. And he commanded a very famous unit known as the Orphan Brigade. Not composed of orphans, just composed of people from Kentucky who fought for the South. And when the war was over, they couldn't go home because Kentucky was a Union state. So they were orphans. And he was killed at the Battle of Chickamauga. In fact, they have a mortuary stack of cannonballs there showing where he was killed. Supposedly, Lincoln only cried noticeably twice in the White House, once when his son died there. And what was that? Was that 62?
Yeah, it was in February of 62.
That's right. Okay, so that's when he cried, and who wouldn't? And then when he heard that Helms had been killed at Chickamauga in 63, because he really had a soft spot in his heart for Helms. We do know that one of the Todds came to Gettysburg before Lincoln. Charles Todd was the chief surgeon of Semmes Brigade there, and they're fighting for the South. So he comes as a surgeon with the Georgia Brigade, although he himself was living in South Carolina. But anyway, so Kentucky thinks it would be a great idea to put a copy of the speech where her favorite son delivered those immortal words. See, he didn't speak over there. Why don't we have a speech where he spoke? Isn't that a great idea? You see, okay? And so they assumed that this is where the spot was where Lincoln spoke. Okay? Well, was it the spot where Lincoln spoke or not? Okay, that's the question. And the answer is really fairly simple, okay, because we have a photograph of the ceremonies here when they dedicated the cemetery. Okay, and this is the photograph right here. Okay, you can't see it from back there, but this is it. I'll show you another version of it. Okay, I'll bring it around. These people don't want to come in, so I have to come in. This is a photograph taken during the speech 150 years ago, November 19th. 150 years ago, November 19th. Okay, right there it is. And you are there. You are there. Okay, right here. So this is the photograph. Now what in the photograph, okay, is still here today and in the same place it was in 1863. What in this photograph is still in the same spot? The arch. Very good, Jessica. The gatehouse is still here. We haven't moved it. We put an addition on, but we haven't moved it. Okay? And if you notice, here is the arch. Okay? There is the arch. Right there it is. It's right there. Okay? And if you'll notice, there's a little tent in the photograph. And that's because the keynote speaker, Edward Everett, wanted to have a tent where he can go and refresh himself. He had what we would call an unreliable bladder. Okay, he's 69. He's 69, and so maybe that's why the speech took 2 hours. I don't know. But anyway, so that sits right by the speaker's rostrum where Lincoln spoke. And you can see it right here. Okay, right there it is. You can see the gatehouse is right there. And of course, where is it? It's to the right of the gatehouse. It's not to the left of the gatehouse. It is to the right, not the left. What's over here is a big American flag. Big American flag. And that big American flag is flying on the spot where this monument stands. We have an eyewitness account to that effect. Eyewitness account to that effect. This comes from early photography at Gettysburg by Bill Frazanito. He's a fraternity brother of mine. Been to the house a few times, but he only comes out at night. And I'm old, and I go to bed at night now. I'm a very boring person. Okay? But during the day, look out. Okay? Anything can happen. You see? Anything can happen. My mother always said I was a perfect angel when I was asleep. Okay? But anyway, so that's where this was. There, the gatehouse still there, and so the rostrum was over there. The rostrum was over there. And Bill Frazanito went to great lengths to document that. Now, I don't know, let me look here when this book was published. 1995. 1995. Okay, you see what this says? It is a mortal address at the site now marked by the Soldiers' Monument. 1970. When I started guiding here, they had a sign right there, the spot where Lincoln delivered his Gettysburg Address. That sign's in storage with the Ark of the Covenant and Elvis. It's in a warehouse somewhere in America, but nobody knows where. Could even be in Adams County, for all we know. So now we want to know where Lincoln spoke, because inquiring minds want to know. No apparent reason, except if you understand one thing. Where was the rostrum? It's over there. You see Yunt? Israel Yunt? Right here, big marker says Yunt. Okay, there's one to the right of that says Kitzmiller and Knock. That's where the rostrum was. Yunt's gravestone would be under the rostrum. It would be under the platform that Lincoln spoke from. It's right there. Okay, it's not over here. The government doesn't even own the land that Lincoln spoke on. Okay, all right. Yeah, but they own the. Yeah. Well, I did tell Teddy that, Teddy Kennedy, and he said, "Well, why is that?" He asked me why the government didn't own the land that Lincoln spoke on.
That's a Kennedy.
That's a Kennedy. Okay, Democrat. And I looked at him and said, "Well, you're the senator. You tell me." That's what I told him. That's what I told him. He said, "Well, that's just not right. Just not right." And so off we stormed. And so that's where Lincoln spoke, and we knew that in 1995. When did he speak? 1863. We didn't nail it down till 1995, so don't tell me you can't find something new about something old. We're still, and we didn't reinvent this. This is not revisionist history. This is just correcting the record. Okay? And sometimes that's confused with revisionist history. What do you mean he didn't speak here? I had a guy get real indignant with me one time. Hey, why didn't he speak here? Trying to find it. He said, "Well, that's all right, that's all right." Then he almost blamed it. I said, "It's not my fault." You know, if it was up to me, I'd have drug him over here and made him speak here. You know, but it wasn't up to me. Okay, so I suspect that's why the gate was there, so people moved through. What threw us off for years, and some of you may know the story, but there's a couple graves in there that said November 1863. Yeah, and they were moved. They were those fellows. There was 3 children that died of the fever. And I wonder what caused the fever. Maybe all these dead bodies in the ground getting into our drinking water. So only 1 civilian killed, but I can guarantee you this right now. A lot more died than Jenny Wade as a result of this battle. Civilians, I mean. Up the spot where Lincoln's sitting there waiting to give the speech. Okay, this is Lincoln here. Then this is Lincoln here. Okay. And I believe this is the Gardner photograph. Yeah, this is Gardner. took care of Lincoln before he, when it said delivered the address. This is about as close as we can get to knowing what Lincoln looked like at the time. Okay, that he spoke here. But anyway, you can see they circled him right there, and there's the, the high ground there, the rostrum. And of course, he's waited for 2 hours for the other guy to speak, Edward Everett. And Edward Everett gave the first history of the battle. Okay, so he went and did his research. The original date was selected in September, and everybody agreed. 17 states were involved in this decision of who they wanted to be the keynote speaker. They all said Edward Everett. He was a great orator. He's all but forgotten today. I still have people on tours that said, who spoke before Lincoln? No clue. I had one guy said George Washington. I said, you're right, but he was dead at the time. Never leave it blank. Remember I told you people, never leave it blank. Okay? But anyway, so he spoke. He was a congressman in Massachusetts. He was governor of Massachusetts. He was our representative to England, our diplomat. He was Secretary of State. He was unsuccessful vice presidential candidate in the election to put Lincoln in the White House in 1860. Okay, and at the time he spoke here, he's president of Harvard, and he graduated Harvard with a law degree. Okay, and actually became a Unitarian minister to start, but then found wasn't as exciting as being a politician and being in the law profession. Okay, and so that's who spoke first. He was well received, a thunderous ovation. I would clap too, because it's 2 hours and he's done. I never thought he was going to shut up. How about you? Okay, and so he sits down. Lincoln gets up to speak. And really no one's paying any attention because they figure the president's good for at least an hour or so. And he'll have to say a few preliminary remarks before he really gets into it. So they're still mulling around and talking about, what a good speech Edward Everett gave. I don't know if you can see it in this photograph or not. Let me look. Let me look at this picture. Sits down to stunned silence. There's a number of accounts about it, but most of them seem to suggest that most people were expecting him to get back up and continue. So when he didn't right away, there was kind of a smattering of polite applause, but nobody cheered and nobody clapped. Okay, and it's Lincoln's speech that we remember because it's so to the point, so succinct. What is it, 272 words? Yeah, and what's the most used word? The article. That's the most used word in the speech. Okay, that'll be on the final exam for you to have my history class. No, I'm just kidding. You do, right? Okay. Yeah, but anyway, so here's one of the copies of it. There's 5 in Lincoln's hand. 5 in Lincoln's hand. None at Gettysburg. We don't have a copy. They used to loan us one, but then they stopped doing that because they're afraid the transportation back and forth would expose it to ultraviolet rays and eventually deteriorate it. So there's 2 in the Library of Congress. There's one in the Lincoln Room in the White House. There's one in Springfield, Illinois, justifiably so. And then there's one in the vault in Cornell University because a rich Cuban bought it at auction, and it wasn't Desi Arnaz. He was outbid. You see, that's a copy we ought to buy. Okay, the bodies were not buried here originally. They were buried other places, and then they were exhumed and brought here, beginning on October 28, 1863. I remember that date because that's my wife's birthday. Okay, there are 2 dates you don't forget when you get married, gentlemen. Okay? Remember this. You do not forget your wife's birthday, and you do not forget your anniversary. Those are 2 dates you must have stamped on you somewhere. A tattoo is recommended. Okay? And keep them on separate hands so you keep them separate. My wife was born October 28th, and she looks good for being that old. No. That wasn't 1863, of course. And then I got married on the longest day. It certainly was for me. Okay, that's in June, for those that don't know, 21st of June, because it's on the calendar. Okay, of course, the problem is that many of you are starting to think it's the shortest night. So if I had to do over again, I'd get married in December. It'd be the shortest day and the longest night. You see, that's a little planning. I wasn't involved in the process. My wife told me when we were getting married. That's why I said, yes, dear. Okay, that's why I started early with that. That's another thing you remember when you're married. Yes, dear. Even if you don't hear what she said, yes, dear usually gets you through it. Okay, and so October 28th, they're digging them up. And here's the only picture we have of them digging up the graves. This picture right here, and you can see that the men that were doing it were African Americans. It's not a job that you want. These people have been buried for several months. And now you've got to dig them out of the ground in pieces. They weren't in coffins. They're exhuming them. They're pulling them out with tongs. Okay? And then they put them in a casket filled with lime that'll kill the stench. Okay, where was this photograph taken? Hanover, Pennsylvania. Yeah, I park right back here by this big building when I go to rehearsal. Okay, right there. It's in the old German Reformed Cemetery, which is still there. The cemetery's still there. You can actually go to the spot. And one time they had a shuffleboard court over top of it. Okay, because they didn't know that it was significant. But then they bring them here in these caskets, and then they put them in the ground here. Here's a picture of them putting them in the ground here. And look at the guy standing. You can see his knees. Are they 6 feet in? Not even close. Okay, not even close. And they're in a wooden casket. You'll notice the casket has a piece of wood tapped on the side. Why? Because they're mummy shaped. Mummy shaped. And if you got to transport them, they'll rattle around. You don't want that guy popping out of there. And so they put those in for spacers so that they would fit tight in the wagon. Eventually they figured out, let's just make them all straight. You see, and that was first used. And the buried in here were actually fought in the Civil War, but they wanted a stone distinctive, so they had to buy it themselves. And they were put back here. These are they weren't here, so they put their markers here. Here in the front row, okay, you see the different symbol on the monument? They're Pan Am War veterans. Been killed in the Spanish-American War. And look, we didn't learn, did we? People who fail to learn from history are doomed to repeat it. We didn't have dogs in the Civil War, we have all those unknown. Look at this. Unknown, 19 of them in there. Okay, how do you know? Count the heads. 19 heads. 19 unknown. See, unknown, unknown, unknown. U.S. soldier. Is that his name? No. Okay. Dog tags 1909. 1909 dog tags. Why do they call them dog tags? Because they had the license of dogs in New York City. They're taken over. Okay? Dog not licensed, what happens to it? You get it and you shoot it. You have to have a license for your dog. And your monkey, too. I have a license for a monkey. Okay? But anyway, so you have to have a license. And they're putting them on men, and they said they're treating us like dogs. So that's how they got the name dog tags. That's how the name comes about. And they're obsolete now. Obsolete. Most of the weapons we have will melt them. So what they use to identify service personnel today? DNA. DNA. They keep that down in Washington, D.C. Used to be in the museum where Sickles' leg was on display. Okay, down there. I don't know where it is now. Probably there anyway. All right, come on through here. Don't trip over these people. You grew up here, you know. And you know the Rosenstiel Museum. And the Rosenstiel Museum had a room that had human remains on display. Oh, yeah, it was fascinating. Go in there, the skull, the bullet in the head. Oh, my gosh. All little kids want that to be seen. You see, and that was a big money grabber. Because they want to go in there and then they want to go back and see that skull. They want to go back again and see the skull and go back again. Okay, when the government takes over in 1971, that was deemed inappropriate to display human remains. And so they put them in boxes in the basement. And I used to go down there, one of my friends was down there. I'd go down and talk to him, and he had the skull sitting on the desk. I said, what's this? He said, well, I have to have someone to talk to. No one ever comes down here and talks to me. Okay, they were just boxes of bones. Is that what you want to do with them? They were better off, I thought, on display. Okay? And so in the 1990, 91, somewhere in that time frame, I can't remember the 90s because my kids were causing too much trouble. Okay? They were starting to get mobile and hostile, you know, all that kind of stuff. But anyway, they decided to bury them with full military honors. And so we had a ceremony here. The old guard from Arlington came up, the casket, you know, the caisson, the riderless horse, the backward boots, the whole 9 yards. It's the only full service that the old guard has done outside of Arlington in their history. Okay, and we had a parade through town. They prepared them at Monahan's down there across from the train station, you know, towards Gettysburg College, Monahan's funeral home, and they brought them up here, and here's where they buried all the remains. And then they found that guy in 1996. What are we going to do with him? Well, let's put him with the rest of them. Okay, so they start digging. These guys are in a vault. They're in a casket in a vault. They have to go down 15 feet to get under the vault. So they started digging back there. And that's what happened. They popped the guy out of his casket. Boom, there he is. What you disturbing for? You see? And he's a World War I veteran that wasn't where he was supposed to be. That's what I like about this place. The dead don't stay put for long. Okay? And that's a real no-no in the Park Service. Oopsie. You know? Okay, so they cordoned the area off, shut it down. And I was at a meeting where they were discussing this. They used to let a guide representative come to the park meetings. And probably because of me, they don't anymore. The superintendent was asking, is this the last body we're going to find? And everybody said, well, probably not. Okay, now how are we going to facilitate, getting this casket out with little effort as we had this time? With less effort than we had this time. He looked at it, yes, Charlie. I said, what you could do is you could put springs in the casket, in the vault, and push the casket down, and then put the dirt on the casket, and that would hold it down. And then if you got to get the casket out, you just dig the dirt off, and the springs go. What do you think? How many think good idea? What do you think? What? How many are in my class here? Good idea? Thank you. Put your hands up. Okay, I guess you guys will. And the superintendent says we'll take it under advisement, but it's in the minutes. They had to write it in the minutes, I thought it was a great idea. I thought it was one of my most brilliant ideas. Okay, so that's where they're going to put them. If they find any more, they're going to come back. Hopefully there's not a World War II veteran back here now. Okay, but this is where we put the ones we find now. Okay, now let's walk over here. If you disobey orders and you make the right choice, you get a medal. If you disobey orders and you make the wrong choice, you get shot. Okay, and that's what Sheridan said to a bright young subordinate by the name of Custer in the Shenandoah Valley. Okay, and so you can see the paint is gold. It's 14 karat gold paint, which is required on all Medal of Honor recipients' graves. And that's where Miller, he survived. He was out on East Cavalry Field there when he decided to lead a charge that cut through the entire Confederate column and caused great confusion in their ranks and perhaps saved the Union right flank on July 3rd. Custer was there as well, and Stewart was trying to come around and cut the Baltimore pike, so when the Northern boys ran after Pickett's charge was successful, they wouldn't get away. And so he's the only Medal of Honor recipient here in the National Cemetery at Gettysburg. Okay, let's walk over this way. Sergeant Amos Humiston. Okay, and there you can see a picture of his 3 children. Humiston here was fighting at the Brickyard near campus. Near Hack's campus is where he's fighting Coster Avenue. Okay, and that's not far from the Hack campus. And of course they were forced to retreat. He runs up Stratton Street towards the town of Gettysburg. Some of you probably travel that to get to Hack sometimes, I imagine. Okay, he's running up, he gets to the railroad tracks, and he's killed. He's found there by a local citizen's daughter, and she says there's a guy laying out there in her yard, Dad, and we don't know who he is. So they went out and they looked, and they found this picture in his hands. That's Freddie, Frankie, and Alice. The last act he did was take one last look at his kids before he expired. Okay? But they don't know, there's no name on the kids. There's no name on him. And so a newspaper guy tried to create an interest in this. Who are the orphans of Gettysburg? And identify them, win valuable prizes. Okay, and this played in all the major newspapers. And there's no, they didn't have pictures of them, but they had descriptions. And sure enough, Philomena Hummiston is wondering why Amos hasn't sent her a check in 8 months. What's the matter with him? We need the money, you see. And then a neighbor reads the newspaper article, comes to her and says, read this. It sounds a lot like your 3 children. Sure enough, it was. Okay, so that's how we identified Amos Hummiston. And Philomena was given one of the government jobs at the orphanage. Right out here, they put a government orphanage here. And in 1867, General Ulysses Simpson Grant came to Gettysburg. Okay, he wasn't here when they were shooting, but he came after to inspect the government orphanage there. And we have a picture of him standing on Baltimore Street, right out there in front of the Soldiers National Museum, with John White Geary, who's wearing a stovepipe hat, and he was 6'5" to begin with. So Grant looks diminutive. Okay, you see, there. But anyway, so that's why Grant did come to Gettysburg. But anyway, that's how we identified this gentleman right here, Sergeant Humstead. And in that memorial service that Dr. Stanton was talking about, when they put the flowers on the graves, the Humstead kids got to put flowers on their father's grave, right here. Okay, so that's good they put that there, you know, because I didn't have a picture of them. But that's what the kids look like: Freddie, Frankie, and Alice. All right, two suns and the moon. Right, two suns and the moon. Okay, I thought it was maybe a backwards one. Okay, New York section. There's New Yorkers, except for the Canadians. Okay, but anyway, 867 bodies. 867, largest state section, New York, which is why they insisted on having their monument here. That's the New York State Memorial. It's the only state monument in the National Cemetery. It's put here in 1893 at the insistence of Congressman Sickles. Daniel Sickles, his footprint is all over this battlefield. Okay? And so he put it there because, as he said, New York has spent more in blood and money on this field than any other state. And remember, you don't get in the White House unless you take New York City. And you don't take New York City unless the Tammany Hall Democrats tell you you do. So he's a fairly powerful individual for his day, and he too is a Medal of Honor recipient for the Battle of Gettysburg. He's the highest ranking officer, highest ranking soldier in the battle to be awarded the Congressional Medal or the medal from Congress there. And I was asked, and there's 71 medals given for the battle and for the campaign. Okay, there. So this is New York, and the New Yorkers are back there. Okay, Pennsylvania is the second most, and Michigan is the third most. See, because there's more. Southerners love shooting at New Yorkers. Ask them; they'll tell you if they had a choice, they'd shoot a New Yorker first. And if they miss a New Yorker, they hit a Pennsylvania, because there's more of us here than anywhere else. And if they miss them, then they hit people from Michigan. Why? Because the Michigan people are in the wrong place at the wrong time. And so those are the order: New York, Pennsylvania, and Michigan. Okay, in that order. All right, let's walk over this way. Buckeyes. I thought there was a Buckeye tree. Oh, there it is. Okay. All right, Ohio, 131. You can see the hole here. The hole is where they put the back in the day, George Nixon had a son who had a son who had a son whose name was Richard. Okay, if you follow that. The simple skinny on this is that this is Richard Nixon's great-grandfather. This is Richard Nixon's great-grandfather. He is the father of Richard Nixon's grandfather. Does that make sense? Is that right? I always get this confused, you know. Okay, but anyway, George was actually born in Pennsylvania, Washington County, Pennsylvania, then moved to Chillicothe, Ohio. For whatever reason he moved. Probably because the land is more level in Chillicothe. They say Ohio has mountains. I'm still looking for them. See, that's why I tell people this is round on the end and high in the middle. Ohio, you see. Okay, it's O-E-O backwards. That's what the monkey people were saying when they went into the witch's castle in the Wizard of Oz. O-E-O, O-E-O. Okay, yeah, if you turn it around and play it the other way, they're saying Ohio. Okay, you got to be able to turn the track around though. All right, and you'll have to try that yourself. I'm not going to tell you if that's true or not. All right, but George Nixon was 42 years old here at the Battle of Gettysburg. He's a little beyond the average military age, 42 years old, and I don't know why he's here. He has 9 children. 9 children. Okay, so he's here, and he gets himself wounded out there in the housing development. Okay, that's where he's hit. He's shot in the hip. He can't get back. A man by the name of Richard Enderlin, who is a drummer in the regiment, was a friend of his, and he wanted to go get him. And the colonel of the regiment said, well, you can go, but you can't take anything with you, because you're likely to be captured out there. It was 50 yards from the front line of the Confederate Army when he's hit. And so Enderlin spent the better part of the morning of July 3rd crawling out to his friend. You can't stand up, they're going to shoot you. And he meticulously crawled on his belly out to the near the Confederate line, found found George, and started to drag him back. It took him several hours to do that, but he got Nixon back in the line, and Enderlin will be a Medal of Honor recipient for his brave act here. It didn't matter because the wound, George will die in August. Okay, so it didn't matter. He brought him in. At least he died among friends and got some medical attention. You see, his wife dies in May of 1865, and I know why. Exhaustion. Okay, 9 kids. I hope, anyway, and she was in her 40s as well. All right, and so the kids were raised by foster relatives. It was usually what happens when a family like that. And one of his relatives moves to California, of course, and that's where Richard Nixon hailed from. Okay, so this, and when Nixon was vice president, even as president, as vice president, we have a picture of him here. Okay, he was sent to Gettysburg. He did one of the speeches here, and he came here and he had a picture taken. When he was president, he hired a man in town to put flowers and an American flag at his great-grandfather's grave every day. That's when he was president. Of course, that stopped after Watergate, you see, and so you can see there's no flowers or flags here now. Okay, but this is one of the more sought-after graves. If you're looking at numbers, about 3,512 are buried here in the Gettysburg section, and then if you look down there, you can add in the others as well. Okay, about 8,000. So let's just go down here one last. 4 of these here, and if you have my history class, we've been talking about, the Roman Church in Rome, Roman Catholics, and the Orthodox Church in Byzantium and Constantinople. These are Orthodox Christians. They were known as Greek Orthodox, and then the church moved to Moscow when Byzantium fell to the Turks. Okay, and we were just talking about that with the Crusades today, or yesterday. I guess. I'm glad you showed up. I want to thank Professor Havel here for actually organizing this and getting the bus. How many followed the bus? Did you follow? How many rode the bus? All right, there you go.
And thanks for joining us here at Weekend Travels as we took a look at Historic Soldiers National Cemetery. Now make sure you guys like and subscribe. That's right, like and subscribe for more of videos here at EPG. Till next week, guys, happy travels, safe travels, enjoy the 4th of July.